The Australian Grand Prix was a feast for us fans. Loads of excitement on track and plenty of incidents to argue with your friends over. I know my mate's WhatsApp chat was popping off. We're going to pick out some of the biggest on-track incidents today that had fans typing furiously during the race. There was Hamilton's pass on Verstappen at turn 3 that Max was sure was illegal. Then there was a Twitter inquiry into whether Verstappen was outside of his pit box at the race restart, which could have meant a post-race time penalty, giving Hamilton his first win since 2021. And what about Carlos Sainz's late penalty for hitting Alonso? There's a lot to dissect, so let's get started. Let's start off with the title incident, which was the pass by Lewis Hamilton on Max Verstappen at turn 3. The Red Bull was awful off the line at every race restart, but the actual race start was the worst of the lot. George Russell flew off the line and comfortably made the pass on pole sitter Verstappen down the inside on turn 1. Hamilton was millimeters away from rear-ending Verstappen going into turn 2 and had to hit the brakes. Normally that would have created enough of a gap that Verstappen would have been safe going into turn 3, but something funky was happening to the Red Bull on the restarts. Verstappen braked super early into turn 3, and luckily Lewis managed to weave to his right before rear-ending him. The reaction speed required to avoid the incident is almost unbelievable. Hamilton got himself alongside Max, not quite wheel to wheel. Max was still a nose in front, but close. Lewis took that inside line, and on the exit, Max ran wide. He stayed on track, but had to take a lot of curb to avoid contact. For some reason, the RB19 seemed to struggle off the line, and Verstappen's early braking into turn 1 and 3 hints at a possible issue with tyre warm-up for the car. Not that it made much of a difference in the end. Verstappen recovered to clinch his first win in Australia and the second of the season, surviving a controversial end-of-race red flag that triggered carnage behind him. Recounting his race, the two-time champion conceded, "We had a very poor start. I was careful because I had a lot to lose and they had a lot to win. I think the pace of the car was quick. You could see that on the straight. We were always there waiting for the DRS to open up, but with these red flags, I don't know." His comment about being careful shows a little maturity which has been missing in the past. The RB19 is comfortably the fastest car on the grid, and unless it got damaged, the Australian Grand Prix was always Max's to lose. It didn't matter if he lost a few places on the first lap, he could get them back once DRS came into effect. All that mattered was making it through damage-free. That doesn't mean Verstappen was happy with what happened. He still thought Hamilton's pass on him was illegal. He immediately radioed his team to tell them as much and reiterated his point after the race. It's quite clear in the rules what you're allowed to do on the outside, but clearly it's not followed. Hamilton responded by saying, "I thought it was pretty decent. He braked early and I braked late. I was fully up the inside and I think we both left space for each other. I didn't run him off the road and he didn't turn into me, so we didn't touch and that's racing." Speaking later to Sky Sports F1, Verstappen said he did not want to make a big thing of the situation. "I would probably do the same if it was the other way around," he said. "I'll raise it, but I also don't want to make it a big thing. When the rules were written like that, I thought they would be respected. I think with these new rules that are set out that if you're racing from the outside, if you're ahead at the apex, you need to be given space at the exit, which I thought I wasn't because I was literally avoiding being crashed into." If you watch the highlights back, you can see Max's point. He isn't left enough space to stay on track without taking contact from Hamilton, but I don't see anything wrong with the move. If Hamilton had been penalised for that move, there would have been outrage. It was a good racing move, and if the FIA wanted to stop those kinds of moves being made, then that would be really disappointing. The best description I can think of is good hard racing. That wasn't the only on-track incident that had fans debating on Sunday though. Verstappen was caught in another fan debate during the second race restart after Magnussen's crash caused the race's second red flag. The red flag in Australia caused a huge stir as well, and if you haven't seen our video on them yet, then you can check it out after this video. The first two races of the season saw two drivers, Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso, pick up penalties for being outside their pit boxes. Formula 1 cars are not designed to be parked in tight spaces, and seeing the lines of the pit box is incredibly difficult from the cockpit. After the penalties in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, the boxes at Albert Park were made wider to avoid the same thing happening there, but some fans thought Verstappen was out of the front of his pit box. The Red Bull driver positioned his car with its front wheels right at the edge of the white line, which marked his grid box at the final restart. Verstappen's start was legal as the International Sporting Code states cars must not stray beyond their starting position. Article 8.6.1a notes, "For a standing start, a car must be stationary at its allocated grid box, with no part of its contact patch of its front tyres outside of the lines, front and sides, at the time of the start signal. However, following the penalties Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon occurred at the first two races of the season, Verstappen's extreme positioning provoked many questions over its legality on social media. The Red Bull driver revealed he moved slightly in his grid box after he originally pulled up in order to optimize his starting position. "To be honest with you, I think I braked a bit late and then I lost my reference a bit," Verstappen explained. "But then I looked and I was like, I have a little bit more space. I actually moved a bit forwards, and yeah, it was really on the limit. But on the limit is on the limit, it's not over the limit." With 2 laps of the race left, it's insane that Verstappen would take the risk of rolling out of his pit box and picking up a 5-second penalty. He was as on the limit as it gets. Him taking that much of a risk perhaps shows how little confidence he has in the RB19 off the line. That extra few centimeters shouldn't really matter, but Max thought he needed it. There was another driver who felt they needed a few extra centimeters, but was punished for it. Following the second red flag period initiated by the right rear tyre breaking free from the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, Ferrari's Carlos Sainz clipped Alonso during the race restart on the exit of the Turn 1 right-hander. The two-time F1 world champion Alonso had lined up third for the third standing start of the heavily disrupted Melbourne race, with his compatriot alongside on the second row of the grid. Alonso moved to the outside of the track after an initial run at Lewis Hamilton, but as he cut back across, the front left wheel of Sainz's car tagged the AMR23 to send it spinning into the wall. The controversial handling of the resulting third red flag, with a safety car called to lead the field over the line in the order of the previous restart minus crash cars, allowed Alonso to reclaim third. However, Sainz was handed a 5-second penalty and dropped to a pointless 12th as a result of the bunched up train of cars crossing the line in quick succession. Sainz got in a late braking contest with Pierre Gasly into Turn 1. While Gasly locked up to avoid going into the back of Alonso, Sainz couldn't slow himself down and instead hit Alonso. The incident follows the same rules as those that Verstappen highlighted for Hamilton's pass on him at Turn 3 at the start of the race. Alonso is well ahead into the corner. Therefore, if Sainz wants to be there, he needs to leave room for Alonso to take his line around the outside of the corner. Sainz tried to take a few extra centimeters in his braking battle with Gasly, then couldn't hold his line because he was going too fast and ended Alonso's race. The penalty was given pretty quickly after the red flag was waved, a couple of turns later, meaning the stewards thought it was a pretty clear-cut mistake by Carlos. An angry Sainz wished to review the penalty with the stewards, stating over team radio, "No, this is unacceptable. They need to wait until the end of the race to discuss with me." Sainz was furious after the race, but unless you are a Ferrari fan, it's hard to see any defense. Looking at the replays of the incident, I think the penalty was deserved and the steward's memo on the penalty explained why. Car 14 was significantly ahead of Car 55 at the first corner, and nevertheless Car 55 drove into Car 14, causing it to spin and leave the track, stated the steward's document. For avoidance of doubt, we took into account the fact that this collision took place at the first lap of the restart, when, by convention, the stewards would typically take a more lenient view of incidents. However, in this particular case, notwithstanding the fact that it was the equivalent of a first lap incident, we considered that there was sufficient gap for Car 55 to take steps to avoid the collision and failed to do so. Sainz's penalty left Ferrari without any points from the weekend. Teammate Charles Leclerc went off on the opening lap after clashing with the other Aston Martin of Lance Stroll at Turn 3, which was judged as a racing incident. The result leaves the Italian manufacturer trailing in 4th place in the F1 World Constructors' Championship and already 97 points behind leaders Red Bull after 3 races. It is now the worst start to a season in 13 years. Will the prancing horse ever win another title? Let us know your thoughts on all the incidents from last weekend's race and make sure to check out our most recent video on the red flag incidents from Melbourne. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.